Hello, freaks, geeks, degenerates, basement dwellers, random, strange people that roam online, and, well, all you fantastic and beautiful Scrufftards. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Skruffytalez. And oh boy, are we gonna piss off the Vatniks with this one because, we have some reports of Russian casualties at Pokrovsk, indicating that Ukraine is, crushing Russia at Pokrovsk. Then we're gonna take a look at rumors that Russia is moving troops away from Pokrovsk, which makes sense. The rumors are that they're moving them to a location where they're gonna be more useful. Then we're going to take a look at the maps because we do have indications that Ukraine is gaining ground in Sumy as well as in and around Pokrovsk, or holding territory, crucial territory at Pokrovsk, I should say. The Russians are advancing as well. Don't get me wrong, Vatniks. Russia is making moves, absolutely. And then towards the end, we'll take a look at some reports that Russia is well and truly being crushed at Pokrovsk, like you wouldn't believe. And well, I've been saying it for 10 to 12 months, haven't I? That at Pokrovsk is where Ukraine can crush the Russian army. So let's take a look. So we're starting off with this interesting news from Ukraine concerning the Pokrovsk direction and the Pokrovsk operational area. And here we have Russia's lost over 12,000 troops in the Pokrovsk and Dobropilya areas in less than 2 months of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And of those 12,000, more than 7,200 are irrecoverable losses, killed in action, in other words. So according to the Ukrainians, it has been a really costly affair in these past 2 months for the Russians in and around Pokrovsk. And so keep this in mind as we move over to see what I wrote on my community section about this entire thing. So this is what I posted on my community section 41 minutes ago. And I'm talking about the post here right next to it, right next to this, and we're talking about Pokrovsk and also the Syrsky line because I address some rumors that Russia is moving troops away from the Pokrovsk area down south towards the end of the Syrsky line. So I'm writing, Russia has been at Pokrovsk for 10 months trying to come around on the flanks the entire year. Now we learn the cost. 12,000 Russian casualties at Pokrovsk in 2 months alone, out of which 7,200 are killed in action, according to Ukraine. This is where Russia has gathered 100,000 troops and also reinforced with units from Sumy Oblast. Like we have been speculating for a year now, it does look like Pokrovsk might become a terrible meat grinder for the Russians. And they haven't even entered Pokrovsk proper yet, still fighting in the suburban areas in the south of the city. Russia has not yet entered into Mirnorad and are struggling with the towns of Rodynske and Shakove. Russia has thrown huge resources into breaking the 3 main encirclements north of Pokrovsk. Beyond these locations, we have territory thick with Ukrainian trenches and bunkers that lead all the way to the large city of Dobropilya, a fortress city in its own right that will be an even tougher obstacle than the twin cities of Pokrovsk Mirnorad, since here Russia cannot push in on the flanks and cut the supply lines. And behind Dobropilya, the formidable Syrsky line, fortifications built specifically to counter current Russian tactics. At the same time, we now hear reports that Russia is moving units from the Pokrovsk operational area to the southern tip of the Syrsky line, or just north of that southern tip, because the rumors are that they're moving them into that push that is just north of the southern tip of the Syrsky line. So first, troops were moved from Sumy to reinforce Pokrovsk. Now troops are moved from Pokrovsk to reinforce the Syrsky line flanking maneuver. Is Russia running low on manpower? Why is Russia forced to move around units all of a sudden? Anyway, this shift of focus, if correct, appears to make a lot of sense. As described above, Pokrovsk and the surrounding area is a death trap. It makes much more sense to try and bypass the Syrsky line in the south without fighting your way through 3 fortress cities before even trying to get through the Syrsky line. The question is if the Russians are too late in moving their troops south. Ukraine has seen this coming for months now due to the slow advance of the Russians. There is more than likely additional defenses built in the south, ready to deal with any Russian forces that push past the Syrsky line and thereby catching the Russians between the Ukrainians holding the Syrsky line and the Ukrainians holding the additional defenses built behind it. If Russia decides to maintain focus on Pokrovsk, Ukraine has a real chance of crushing the Russian war effort. Pokrovsk will be a meat grinder that will draw in more and more Russian resources, more and more manpower. And we know it's having an effect, since the Russians have only in 2 years' time secured 1.3% of Ukrainian territory. With huge amounts of Russian resources tied up at Pokrovsk, they will secure even less going into 2026. The real danger is if Russia changes focus to the south of the Syrsky line and gets past it, without Ukraine having proper defenses and manpower in place to counter the Russian advance. As we check the maps, we'll see that it appears as if the Ukrainians might actually have defenses and manpower in place. We should also not forget that Russia appears to have increased their efforts in the northeast, in the Kharkiv and Luhansk Oblast, where they are currently trying to gain the advantage to eventually close the gap between Vovchansk and Kupiansk. And all of this was highlighted by my Discord members, so I kind of put the pieces together based on the links and what have you that they provided. So there's a link to the Discord over in the community section if you're interested in it. But yeah, that's what I wrote on the community section concerning these casualty figures that we have seen reported on at Pokrovsk. And here you can see the dog in the background. Here you can see the rumors of the where the hell is the dog? Okay, anyway. Dog distracting me. Here we can see the rumors of the Russian units being redeployed from the Pokrovsk area down south towards the Syrsky line. This is the far end of the Syrsky line, so it appears they're trying to reinforce this section, which is interesting because we're seeing reports of Ukrainian countermoves in this area, so it might be due to that. But here you have the rumors that these units have been moved along with the 90th Tank Division that are being pushed in to reinforce this part here that is pushing towards the southern end of the Syrsky line. Makes more sense to me that they're focusing down here instead of up around Pokrovsk. And I'll show you why that is, of course. Right, so we're borrowing Deep State here. So this line here represents the Syrsky line, this formidable defensive line that Ukrainians have built. And so this is where Russia is focusing their attack, right? So what they're up against up here is Pokrovsk, Mirnorad, and Dobropilya. These are the 3 fortress cities that the Russians have to overcome before even reaching the Syrsky line. And we know that the Russians are struggling here with Rudinsky. They're struggling up here with Chakova, these smaller towns. And so, I mean, this is a whole lot of trouble for the Russians. And in between Dobropilya and Pokrovsk, in this area here, it's just thick with Ukrainian trenches and bunkers and what have you. So Russians have to fight their way through all of this before even thinking about dealing with the Syrsky line. So, of course, it makes much more sense for the Russians to focus on trying to bypass the Syrsky line down here and coming up behind it. And according to rumors, they are focusing on reinforcing here and here, maybe because they want to push out this way and reaching the Syrski line while applying pressure down here. But still, you don't have these fortified locations, these fortress cities in a way. So if you want to deal with the Syrski line, why not focus down here instead of pushing into this obvious meat grinder that will just wreck the Russian army, as we're seeing, right? They're losing thousands and thousands of troops, never mind the wounded, right? And they haven't even entered Pokrovsk proper. They haven't entered Mirnorod. They're not even close to Dobropilya, and they haven't taken smaller towns like Rodinsky and Shakovo yet. It makes perfect sense for Russians to shift focus down here, and we've talked about this before. I've highlighted this before. But if they decide to focus up here, it's gonna be hell on earth for the Russians, and which is why I've claimed for 12 months now, if not longer, that this here is where Ukraine can well and truly crush the Russian army. Right, so moving over to the maps, ISW, we can see here, the other day we saw ISW showing Ukrainians pushing into the center of Yunakivka. Now over here we can see that we have confirmed that Ukraine has secured the southern parts of Oleksivka and coming up to the west of Oleksivka. So we're going to take a look at that later on, or in a short while. And moving down here, you can see here, this is where the Russians are trying to push past the Syrski line, where we have some Ukrainian counterattacks over here, and most recently here. But also if we move a bit north, we can see that they've pushed back into this small town. We're also seeing the Russians coming up here, north of Udachne. We're going to take a look where that is. But very importantly is that ISW once again has this part of the battlefield under Ukrainian control. It was yellow for a couple of days, but now ISW has new information that makes them confident that Ukraine is indeed still in control of this region here. So we're going to take a look where that is on the map as well, and that is basically the main updates for the evening here. Lyman seems to have stagnated a bit. The Russians are not making much gains of late. Same thing for up at Kupiansk. Wrong, I'm lying. Take a look. I didn't realize this had happened. Big push from the Russians down here, straight into the center of town. Not clear if this is what do you call it, Jaeger style commando units that have infiltrated, or if this is actually infantry units moving in. Might have to try and read up on that. Might get back to you towards the end of the video what this might be. But as you can see here, this is a big push by the Russians straight into the center of town, if true. So we need to double check that before we end the video. Good thing I zoomed in. Anyway, but we're gonna move down here to check Pokrovsk and check Sumy with my maps to figure out what's going on. Right, so my map for Pokrovsk, but I think we're actually gonna move up to Sumy instead and start off up here. So this is what we know recently. So last week, I think it was last week, I think that Ukraine pushed up here. They came down, this is a big hill, they moved down the slopes towards the valley and pushed the Russians all the way back to the border, and have secured the lake area here, and they've effectively pushed Russia back from Kindrativka all the way to the border here. A big propaganda win for the Ukrainians. They've pushed Russia back to the border, and the Russians are only holding this small town here right on the border here. Not much to talk about really. We've also seen in the past couple of days that Ukraine, they were pushed back down to the southern parts here of Yunakivka, but have since pushed up here into the eastern parts of town and moved straight up into the center of town, where Russians surrendered, and the Russians responded by sending in drones against their own surrendering troops. Yeah. So that's how the Russians deal with the soldiers that surrender. But Ukrainians are pushing back at Yunakivka and have pushed into the center of town. And now, like we have said, at Oleksivka, we're seeing the Ukrainians securing the southern part of the village. And they have also pushed in from the west, taken this far more than likely, and secured this area here. It looks like some form of industrial site, doesn't it? Whatever that might be. But so we have Ukrainians coming in from the west and the south, threatening Oleksivka. The Russians have been fighting tooth and nail to hold this small town, this small village. But now finally we're seeing evidence that Ukrainians have established a proper foothold in the town/village. So Ukraine has momentum and initiative in Sumy Oblast. And it more than likely is because we know that Russia has moved troops out of Sumy Oblast to support the Pokrovsk operational area. And Ukraine is effectively, slowly but surely winning this battle and forcing the Russians back inch by inch. And now we're going to move down to Pokrovsk, and we must not forget to take a look at Kupiansk at the end. But this is Pokrovsk. Now we saw Russians advancing over here at Udachne, and that is so the Russians have come up to the east of this. Is this a mining facility or a factory of some sort? I don't know what this is, but to the east of this large industrial area, the Russians have come up here, and that should indicate that there are in these windbreaks here. So they managed to move across these open spaces to establish a foothold here, threatening the eastern parts of this factory. And according to ISW, Russia has also moved up here along these windbreaks and taken this small industrial site as well. So Russia is pushing out of Udachne by the looks of it to threaten this industrial site here. We'll see how successful they are with that. But this is a bit worrisome because when you take a look at the Moulin, what's his name, Moulin? The French guy that tracks all the airstrikes. We've been seeing that Russians are focusing this past month airstrikes in this area here, indicating that the Russians more than likely wants to push north from Kotlyne towards the E50 highway here. And if they manage to do that, if they manage to push out of Udachne, push out of Kotlyne and reach the E50 highway, they have essentially cut off basically almost every supply line leading into Pokrovsk. Because if they are up here, then they can easily cut this supply line leading out of Ryshne. And then there's only one left for the Ukrainians to rely on. And it's this one that breaks out of Ryshne a bit north and comes in this way. And then you can start moving down south into Pokrovsk. You can still utilize this one through Rodinsky, I guess, if you have fast-moving vehicles. But I don't think the Ukrainians are moving down this way with larger trucks that are slow and easily targeted by drones, being so close to the actual front line here. So I think we're seeing indications that the Russians are beginning to move north towards the E50 since they're pushing up this way. And we're seeing all the airstrikes here shaping the battlefield for the Russians to begin these maneuvers north. This is troublesome. This is more important than anything happening up here for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians must hold the line here, because if the Russians can begin pushing up this way, Pokrovsk is well and truly in danger. Moving into Pokrovsk, the Russians are basically claiming that they are in control of everything within the yellow dotted line. Complete bullshit, because we're seeing the Russians bombarding this part of town, especially with artillery. They're just flattening this part of town in the last couple of days. So if they are in control of this part of town, why the hell are they shelling it? Makes no sense, right? And we're also seeing that the Russians are shelling this part of town. Again, if they're up here, why the hell are they shelling down here, which is the pathway north into these areas? Makes no sense. What we do know is that up here, around here, you had some commando units, 3 to 4 guys moving around, ambushing Ukrainians, and because you had this small infiltration unit established this far into Pokrovsk, the Russians have marked the entire area as under their control. Complete bullshit. Anyway, this part here is a highly contested area. As you can see here, it's a funnel. You're gonna get wedged in between the open spaces here and the open spaces here with the lake. So if the Russians are trying to push north, they have really no other options than to follow these streets north. And same thing for the Ukrainians. If they want to defend this suburban area, they have to follow the streets south. So my guess is that this is a shit show where you don't have any confirmed front lines. Every other building, every other basement, essentially, because I assume all the buildings are, ruins by now. Every other basement is either in control of Ukrainians and Russians. You may have machine gunners covering the streets, along the length of the street. Drones are probably hunting like crazy all over the place. Both sides are calling in accurate artillery and mortar strikes on known enemy locations. This is more than likely a complete hellhole to fight in at the moment for both sides, and explains why the Russians haven't pushed further north. This is no fun at all. Moving down over here, Russians claim that they have this area, but that is complete bullshit, as evident by the Russians shelling the area like crazy, and simply because it's nothing but high-rise buildings, and you don't steamroll through an area like this, like the Russians claim they have. And we can jump over to the ISW map, and I will show you what we're talking about. Yeah, this is the area. So the Russians are more than likely holding this part here, and we know they're down here, absolutely. But as you can see here, dozens of high-rise buildings, some extremely tall. Artillery has reduced everything to rubble, nothing but skeletons, concrete, steel, blown out the windows and what have you, collapsed walls. This is dystopian, to say the least. But more importantly, this type of urban environment favors the defenders 100%. In this kind of environment, the attacker needs a 10 or 20 to 1 advantage to push through a building. And we're talking that you need a few hundred guys to clear out each one of these buildings. Right? So you just don't steamroll through an area like this. And every soldier is going to need a couple of thousand rounds of ammunition, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hand grenades, and copious amounts of water to maintain combat ready and combat efficient in this environment. It is extremely hard work pushing through an urban environment like this, with all the apartments, all the basements, all the cellars, all the attics and what you have. Corridors, narrow lanes, and everything is concrete. Everything is steel, reinforced steel structures and what have you. So no, the Russians have not steamrolled through here. This is slow going. If they do gain access to a building, it's going to take potentially days to clear out a single building. If the Ukrainians are holed up in them. So, like I said, you need a 10 to 20 against 1 advantage, because you're going to be funneled into kill zones. I mean, imagine walking down a corridor in an apartment building and there's a machine gunner at the far end. How the hell do you advance? He's got every advantage on you. They may set booby traps in every doorway, every staircase. There might be guys dropping hand grenades down from above at you. No, they're not steamrolling through here. It's going to take hundreds of guys to secure each and one of these buildings. And like I said, insane amounts of logistics per soldier. Thousands of rounds of ammo, dozens and dozens and dozens of hand grenades per trooper. and I don't know how many liters of water just to keep a single soldier combat efficient pushing through these buildings. They're going to be crawling over rubble. They're going to be walking upstairs in heavy equipment. There's going to be firefights at every corner. And, as soon as you step into an apartment or step into any room, you might be shot at, stabbed, or be walking through tripwire and setting off a booby trap. So that is why there's no chance in hell that this area is under Russian control. And we're also seeing it with the Russians bombarding this entire area with artillery to set the stage for the Russians to push in. You might have Russians in these buildings on the outskirts here. Maybe they have pushed into the basements and what have you, or ground level and worked their way up one stairs and one of the stairways and what have you. Absolutely, that might be the case, but they're not. They have not pushed in deep enough to control the area. I'm rambling, but we're going to stay on this topic. So you see these tall buildings here. Here's the thing with fighting in this environment. You may be in control of one floor, but the next floor might be under the enemy control, and then you might have the 2 floors up. You might have 3 or 4 rooms under your control, and the enemy has 6 or 8 rooms, and these might be spread out. And you might control a staircase over here, but the enemy controls a staircase over here, so they can move up and down here. You may be able to move up and down here, and in between it's just chaos, who's in control of what, and then you try to secure corridors, and then you have to make your way through various apartments and rooms to try and clear it out. But I mean, with all the artillery shelling, there might be holes in the walls, holes in the ceilings and the floor, so you can move up and down between floors, between rooms, without utilizing the staircases and stairwells, right? So that is what makes it such a bitch to assault and so easy to defend. So just to highlight just the incredible difficulty of assaulting a large area of high-rise buildings like this. I mean, it continues over here as well. Take a look. So no. The Ukrainians are holding this part of town, definitely, and all the artillery strikes are evidence of it. And when the Russians do try and push in force, it's gonna be hell. It's not gonna be a walk in the park for anyone involved. But yeah, that's it for this part of the battlefield. Right, so yeah, no, bullshit, they're not here. Anyway, so that's Pokrovsk. Moving on to Novoekonomichne. Still no further updates here. It does appear as if Mirolobivka might be surrounded. The Russians appears to have pushed into the southern parts of Novoekonomichne. They have pushed into this part here between Mirolobivka and Mirnorad. And we have seen Russian intentions of pushing up here to the west of Novoekonomichne. Unclear if they've successfully done so. But all of this combined, I mean, it does appear as if Mirolobivka is surrounded. And it also appears as if the Russians have regained control of the territory here around Myrne, unfortunately. Moving further north, northern parts of Novoekonomichne, contested. But it might be leaning, truth be told, might be leaning towards that the Russians are in control up here as well. And this indicates in that case that Russia has managed to push strongly up to the west, along the western bank of the river, and have in so doing punched through the Ukrainian encirclement and can relieve, support and supply the troops here in the Rudinsky pocket. So I suppose we can expect a lot of Russian troops and supplies moving north here at speed to try and reach and resupply reinforce the units here in the Rudinsky pocket. Going further north still, we on the ISW map now have reconfirmed that the Ukrainians are in control of Boykivka. This was in the gray zone for a bit, but now ISW is back in certainty that Ukrainians are in control of this push here, and they are in Boykivka, and that means that this bridge across the marshes and river cannot be used by the Russians for logistical purposes. It is also proof that the Shakova pocket is isolated and cut off. The Russians cannot move supplies unless with drones to the Shakova pocket. And as we can see on other maps as well, this part here is contested. This big hill, we've been talking about it on several occasions in all of my videos, how the Ukrainians are contesting the entire hill. And I think since we're seeing the Russians coming out this way towards Dorozhny, I think the Russians in the Shakova pocket are trying to bypass the hill by coming down this way in an attempt to break through the Ukrainian encirclement and reaching the Rudinsky pocket. So the Russians have a bit, they have some ways to go. They need to come through these woods here. They need to push down along the railroad here and reach this here windbreak in order to open up the Ukrainian lines, and then maybe stand a chance of receiving reinforcements from the Rudinsky pocket. But the troops in the Shakova pocket, they are, by the looks of it, more than likely cut off and isolated. Yeah, not much else going on. I think we have the troops in Kuchera Yar trying to push north to Zoloty Kolodyash. We'll see if the Ukrainians can lock them down. Here with the Russians coming up north to try and isolate Shakova. They haven't gone any. There was big talks when they came up this way, but not much has happened since. They're trying to come in towards Sofika here, and if they do that, it limits Ukrainian options to reaching Shakova. Because if the Russians can reach the river, then they have fire control over this part here, along the slopes here of these hills. So it makes it difficult for Ukraine to move anything down straight north into Shakova. And then Ukraine really only has one option, and it's this road here. It comes across a big hill on the northern side of the ridge, so any Russians down here will have issues firing on Ukrainians coming down this road. That said, though, Ukraine needs to clear and secure this limestone quarry, whatever it is, if they want to utilize this road. And by the looks of it, this part here is under Russian control at the moment. So we'll see how the Ukrainians solve the Shakova issue if the Russians manage to push through here to Sofika and the river. But yeah, I think that about sums it up. Ukraine has secured Boykivka once again. Ukraine is pushing hard at Sumy Oblast. And yeah, Ukraine is inflicting massive amounts of casualties on the Russians here, as we talked about in the beginning of the video here. So yeah, if the Russians double down on this area around Pokrovsk, Ukraine has a really good chance of inflicting massive amounts of damage on the Russian army and Russian war effort. Now we need to remember to take a look what's happening at Kupiansk. So I didn't find anything about that push into the center of Kupiansk except for this from the 7th yesterday. Unconfirmed claims, a Russian middle blogger claimed that Russian forces advanced in central and southern Kupiansk. But ISW usually marks these claims as yellow, so if they've marked it as red, means they must have seen some evidence of this claim. So since it's not yellow on the ISW map, there must be something about it that convinces them that these claims, that they have some proof that the Russians actually have made this push. So we're going to have to assume there's something to it. But as I was looking around, I found something else that was really interesting, and we're talking about how Pokrovsk is important and how Ukraine can potentially make a tremendous impact on the Russian war effort if they can grind down the Russians at Pokrovsk. So let's take a look at that. So here we are, we're talking January to August 2025, Pokrovsk, Kupiansk, and Liman. But we're going to take a look at Pokrovsk here. Responsible for the Pokrovsk direction, suffered the heaviest casualties during this period with 43,709 killed, missing, and captured, and 52,000, nearly 53,000 wounded. And so these numbers means that Russian forces suffered roughly 34% of their casualties in this direction during the first 8 months of 2025. So a third of Russian casualties took place in Pokrovsk. That's how important Pokrovsk is to the Russians. And that is what I've been saying for how long? 10 months? 12 months? This is where Ukraine can crush the Russian army at Pokrovsk. Russia's already lost a third of their casualties in 2025 at Pokrovsk. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Right? So, at Pokrovsk, a full third of Russian casualties in 2025 has happened at Pokrovsk. This is it. This is the battle that Ukraine must win. Where they don't need to win it, they just need to hold on for as long as possible and just have the Russians just push more troops into this meat grinder. At Pokrovsk and Myrnorod, Dobropilya, and the defensive lines between them and the Syrsky line behind all of that. This is where Ukraine has a chance of crushing the Russian army. I've been saying it for 10 to 12 months. And here you have it. 34%. Right there. There you have it. For 12 months, I've been saying this. And it's happening. We'll see now with these rumors that the Russians are moving troops south towards the southern part of the Syrsky line. Makes perfect sense. So I hope they're not doing it for real, because it is at Pokrovsk where Ukraine wants the Russians. In this massive meat grinder where they can just grind them down. Just incredible. Just incredible. It's happening. It's happening. Ukraine is crushing the Russian army at Pokrovsk. Yeah. Who else said 10 and 12 months ago that Pokrovsk would be this important? That this is where Ukraine would be planning to trap the Russians and grind them down. Who else did that? Well, I mean, for as far as armchair generals go, you have to admit, I have a decent track record doing this shit, predicting shit. I fucked up from time to time. Absolutely, I don't deny it. But who else predicted the importance of Pokrovsk? No one. I mean, the Vatniks, they just thought that the Russians would steamroll through Pokrovsk in a week, right? But yeah, here we are. It's fucking incredible. Anyway, that's going to have to be it. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine. And for fuck's sake, give them hell.